Good morning. It's so lovely to be with you this morning, and today I've got the pleasure of chatting with our expert on all things sleep, Dr Carmel Harrington. Welcome.
Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here and talk about sleep.
Oh, look, it's been, of course, always a really important conversation, but this year more than ever.
Yeah.
I think there's been many nights where a lot of us have certainly missed out on sleep.
Yeah.
And it seems to be a conversation that more and more of us are having. So tell me, I'd love to hear about what, started your journey into becoming an expert on all things sleep.
Yeah, it's been a long journey. You never know what life throws up at you, I've got to say, Maggie. But anyway, so I used to be a lawyer.
Oh, wow.
A long time ago, I was a lawyer. And I'd see these, beautiful young lawyers, highly trained, gorgeous and really capable people coming in very keen and passionate about their work. And after a year or two, you could see them just descending down. Their workload was really high and they lost their interest in their work, they lost their passion for their work. Some of them were putting on weight. And overall, it was a very unfun experience for them. And so in law, those many years ago, there was a bleed from the profession at around about the 4-year mark because people were saying, is this the life I want? I hate law. I hate everything about it. They would leave, and then, of course, they're very intelligent, very capable, and they'd be very successful somewhere else. But my thoughts at that time was, they don't hate the law, they just hate their life at the moment. And one of the things that they were really suffering was lack of sleep.
Wow.
Yeah, really big time, because billable hours,
Yes.
the longer the time behind the desk, the more likely you are to be promoted, the more money you make. And so, of course, these people were, young people were leaving work at 10 or 11 o'clock at night to impress their partner. They would be back at the office at 6 a.m. So what were they missing out on?
Oh,
Sleep.
gosh, sleep would be the first thing to go.
Absolutely, it's gone. And when we lose our sleep, we lose our good exercise intentions. We lose our ability to control what we eat because our reward pathways are going, feed me, feed me, feed me. And so all of a sudden your lifestyle is not what you imagined, your life is not what you imagined. And so these people would make the pivot. It was so sad to see this descent into unhappiness. And so I thought, well, sleep is really important. Let me find out more about it.
Oh, that is such an exciting journey. And then through your research, I'd love to hear, as Australians, where are we at the moment? What's the status?
Well, I think we've got to contextualise this. Okay, so I often say, well, look, life happens gradually. We often don't see decrements as they occur because it slowly gets worse or slowly gets better. And so if we go back, say, to the mid-1960s or early 1960s, everyone started getting a car, incidental exercise decreased. We didn't understand the importance of exercise at that point because we just had it anyway. And so in the mid-1970s, you're too young to remember this, they had actually an exercise, they had an education program, a national education program called Norm, Life Be In It. And so Norm had to get off the couch because he had stopped exercising due to the access to easy transport, right? And so we educated people about the importance of exercise. So if you move on another 10 years, we forget there was a time that there wasn't fast food. There weren't huge mega supermarkets out there to make access to food really easy. But that happened probably early 70s, mid 70s.
Yes.
And so by 1985, the government had to run another education program, educating people about the importance of nutritional choices. So not all food's the same. So in the past, we didn't have access to high fat, high sugar foods, but all of a sudden we had as much as we wanted and pretty easily, all right? And so we had the education program called the More of Less Diet.
Right, okay.
So people learnt very well about nutritional choices. So it'd be unusual for you to come across even a 4-year-old who didn't know that exercising was better than sitting on the couch and that an apple was a better choice than a bar of chocolate, right? Because we're also educated and we educate our children. All right, so fast forward now to now.
Yes.
We are a nation of sleepless people. About 1 in 2 of us are not getting the 7 to 9 hours we need. And I'm going to go back 10 years because we forget there was a time that we didn't always have our wonderful mobile devices on us.
To think that it was only, not that many years ago
Only
before
10.
we had internet on our mobile phones.
I know, and that has absolutely changed our perception. And so we can be busy and entertained 24/7. So we've lost discipline around sleep, and we're only just beginning to realise the importance of sleep because we had a lack of it, and now everyone's interested. But unfortunately, in much the same way as we lost our way with exercise and lost our way with nutrition, people have now lost their way with sleep. They don't know how to get a good night's sleep. Whereas in our grandparents' day, that came naturally. That's just what you did when the lights turned off. The TV went off, they said goodbye, and the TV channels shut down. Yeah, so...
Very different routine.
Absolutely, yeah. So, fairly sleepless nation right now, but we do mimic the rest of the world.
So tell me, what are the most common concerns that some of your patients have around sleep, or lack thereof, I guess?
Look, there's quite a few. We often think about difficulty having sleep is to do with, you had coffee too late in the day or things like that. But actually it's way more complex than that. People come in because they're not sleeping well. Now that's a very big statement, isn't it? I'm not sleeping well. So when I'm talking to people, I have to deconstruct that statement to find out, okay, what part of sleep aren't you doing very well and what's happening? So one of the things that people have a lot of trouble with is either getting to sleep or actually staying asleep.
Okay.
And so there's all sorts of ways we measure this, and always people have to do a sleep diary. I can't do anything unless people do a sleep diary for 7 days, because what we do during the day affects how we sleep at night, and how we sleep at night affects what we do during the day. So our body, as you know in your area, is so holistic, and it actually is very harmonious if we allow it to be. So there's lots of things that can interfere with sleep, but you have to sort of deconstruct it. And one of the great things that actually is a problem, especially this year, is anxiety.
Yes.
Yeah, and so when people don't sleep well, you actually get an increase in your cortisol level, which makes you even more anxious, and so it can be a never-ending spiral
so the cycle
down.
just continues then, doesn't it?
Yeah, and so often these people say, oh no, I'm not anxious because I go to sleep really quickly, but then I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning. So one of the things is when we go to sleep really quickly, that's because something called your sleep drive is really high, and this is the amount of sleepy chemical, neurotransmitter that you have in your brain, that you actually can go to sleep really quickly. But after about 2 sleep cycles, you'll wake up and you can be very, very alert, and you'll have difficulty falling back to sleep if indeed you do. So many times we have to work out whether, is it a sleep behavioural problem? Is it a sleep, what we do during the day, or is it something within us? Is there anxiety, or is it something traumatic going on in their lives? So there's lots of things that can actually affect a person's ability to sleep. And I haven't even started talking about sleep disorders,
That's right.
which is something else
I love
altogether.
what you've mentioned about the sleep diary.
Yes.
I've actually never heard of doing one before, or having one recommended, but that's really interesting, and I can completely understand why you would need that to gauge where someone's at.
Absolutely. And in fact, it's so interesting. So many times when people have done a sleep diary, by the time they come and see me after that 7 days, they're actually diagnosing their own problems, because they've seen, because I can't remember what I had for breakfast yesterday, let alone, what happened 3 days ago. So often your perception of what has happened in the last 7 days is a little bit skew-if. So let's record it as it happens, and it works really well.
Giving myself some homework.
Yes,
Thank you.
that's right, yeah.
I can't believe how much we've managed to discuss this morning, and we haven't even gotten to the crux of it yet, our actual sleep. But I love that. It just goes to show just how important all of those different aspects are for a holistic approach to getting enough rest.
Yeah.
Okay, so once a patient's kept a sleep diary and you've had time, or they've had time to perhaps see the writing on the wall, so to speak, what are the next steps?
Well, educating people is always the secret, because I can't be in their bedroom at night and they've got to get themselves to sleep. So if you understand something, then you can start to manage autonomy over that thing. So I always explain the sleep process. So there's a couple of things that are really important when we talk about the sleep process. So we have to understand that not all sleep is the same. Now, lots of people are very comfortable with the idea of, REM sleep or dream sleep and all that sort of stuff, but they actually don't know what all this means. So we sleep in cycles. So we just don't go to sleep and then wake up the next morning feeling great. There's all sorts of things that go on in our sleep that we cannot do in our wakeful hours. Keep in mind, I always love bringing this fact in, that if I deprived a rat pups totally of food or totally of sleep, they will die quicker from lack of sleep than lack of food. Now, I think that's really quite astounding, and it highlights the fact that what we do in our sleep is vital for our survival. So, how do we sleep? Well, we start off in wakefulness and then we descend into our light sleep. And we're in light sleep for a while, and then we go down into our deep sleep. And then we pop up into our dream sleep or our rapid eye movement sleep. And that is a complete sleep cycle. Light sleep, deep sleep, REM. And then we pop up into wakefulness again briefly, and then we start the cycle over again. So each sleep cycle takes about 90 to 110 minutes. It varies according to your sleep needs. And we, as adults, for a healthy sleep, we need 5 complete sleep cycles. Okay, so that's your question. Are we sleepless? Yes, we're sleepless. And so what do we do in each of those stages? Well, deep sleep is really important for our repair and restoration of our physiological systems, all right? So what happens when we go into deep sleep, if you watch somebody sleeping, and you can sort of pick the deep sleep. Now, I have watched lots of people sleeping over my time, which is a bit creepy, I think. But when they go into deep sleep, they're very quiescent, so their breathing rate goes down and their blood pressure and their nervous system activity goes right down. And so our body's then busy repairing, secreting this beautiful growth hormone and restoring our systems so that we're ready for survival the next day. Very important thing. So then we go up into our dream sleep. Now, our dream sleep is really important for our cognitive function and for our good behaviour the next day.
Making the right decisions.
Absolutely. Now, if we don't get enough of our REM sleep, we are going to find that we don't think as well, our decision making is poor, our risk taking increases, all those sorts of things that we know is associated with lack of sleep. And so when we deprive ourselves of enough sleep, we're missing out on either deep sleep or REM sleep or our light sleep. And so what happens, and what I explain to people is, when you're going to sleep, when you're really tired and you haven't been sleeping enough, you've got a high sleep debt. So you will fall asleep really quickly because we've got this, as I said before, this neurotransmitter called adenosine. And that says to the brain, you've got to sleep because you're really, really tired, you're really sleepy. But after about 2 complete sleep cycles, if you haven't behaved well during the day or you haven't had good sleep behaviours before going to sleep, or you're anxious, you will wake up, which is why people wake up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, because their system hasn't gone down enough before they've gone to sleep.
I love that you've explained that for me. I've always wondered why it is that you can be really, really exhausted and go to sleep quite easily, but then you've got that 3 a.m.
That's right. And so it's a little bit, when you go to sleep really quickly like that, or you've been on your iPhone or whatever before you go to sleep, and you go to sleep really quickly, it's a little bit like getting out of the car with the motor running. So the motor's still going like this, but you've moved away for a period of time, then you've got back in. So all those things going around in your head will hit you at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. So it's really important to recognise, and I make sure people understand this, how we approach sleep really depends on how we live our day as well.
Okay, that's such an important message. Well, it sounds then like getting that routine in motion is something that would be really important then. What are some of your top tips for developing a routine?
Look, I can't stress enough that one of the most important things we can do is start to prioritise sleep. So the way we divvy up our day often, we can think of it as a pie chart. 8 hours of sleep, 8 hours of work and 8 hours of leisure. Now, of course, lots of us work more than 8 hours, right? So if we work more than 8 hours, then we might work 10 or 11. Where do we take that time from? We can't take it from our sleep. we have to take it from the other. And people often take it from their sleep. But once you flick the switch and say, okay, my sleep is too important to me, I'm going to start with the fact I need 8 hours sleep. Then I have whatever hours I need to work, and then I have this rest for the other. That's a really big start. And then, of course, we have to recognise that it's very important to switch off, to allow our body to recognise that this is now time for sleep. So the other big tip I have is 1 hour before bedtime, you actually switch off. You switch off your technology, you dim the lights in your room, and this is where I think the story of essential oils is really important, because what we do to ourselves at that time is our brain responds so well to environmental stimulators. So if we light a candle or start having some beautiful aromatherapy or oil, our body starts to think, not only does it have an effect, a physical effect on the brain, but also the visual cues for the brain means that, this is the time I start to quieten down. This is when I go into my nurturing and nourishing phase of the day, and it's really important that we do that. And so having that routine in that 1 hour before bed is one of my very, very top tips. The other thing is, typical things, reduce your intake of caffeine, limit your alcohol intake, exercise, expose yourself to bright sunlight. And the other thing is people often don't recognise is that my time that I get up in the morning affects my ability to go to sleep that night. So remember that 16 hours after you wake up, expose yourself to bright sunlight or bright light. That's when you are able to go back to sleep. So if you have a sleep in on Sundays and don't get up to 11 a.m, you're not actually ready to go to sleep until about 2 a.m. the following morning, and people don't recognise that circadian rhythm, the biological clock, is really determinant of when you go to sleep that night. So there are a few of the tips, yeah.
Oh, fantastic. That time waking up then, even
Yes.
sometimes, although tempting, great
just don't do it.
Yeah,
That's right, yeah.
Not worth it. And tell me, I know that you just mentioned, pure essential oils perhaps as part of that evening routine. What are some of the oils that you like to use of an evening time?
Yeah, well, look, I do love sleep, so I think lavender is just fantastic. And I'm so surprised and happy that the research around this area has really moved on in the last 10 years. So when I've been in sleep for a really long time now, and when I first started, it was like this feel-good idea, just do it and it'll make you relax. But our understanding of smell and what it does to our brain has really changed in the last 10 years. And we now understand that if we can smell something, it's actually the molecules, the chemicals are in our brain, in our olfactory system, and we actually activate or deactivate different parts of our brain. And so with lavender, what I love about that is it actually reduces our nervous system input into our brain. So it has for anyone who's interested, enhances our GABAergic pathway, which is our sleep and calming pathways. And so that's why the work out there being done right now is showing such great results with particularly lavender and chamomile with sleep and decreasing anxiety and improving depression scores. So I think that's my favourite.
It's just so impressive and really quite positive to hear that there are now, some evidence and then also just some clarification around the effect that it can have. And yes, I agree, lavender and chamomile, absolutely beautiful combination.
Well, when you think about it, aromatherapy's been around for, thousands of years. And so you always have to wonder, it's like yoga or Ayurvedic medicine. These things have been there. They've got the foundation of longevity. So there's something in them. And just because Western medicine doesn't pick it up straight away doesn't mean that it's not there. And aromatherapy now is being used in different medical settings, like in intensive care units, in dementia patients. There's quite a number of areas it's being used in clinical settings. And so, of course, Western medicine's a little bit slow to come around. But the other thing, of course, with complementary therapies, and especially aromatherapy, what's the downside? I mean, it just makes you feel good. But now we have the clinical evidence, so, we don't have to worry about that. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, perfect. It's so good to hear. And tell me, I love that you're enjoying chamomile and lavender of an evening as part of your sleep routine. What about during the day? What are your favourite pure essential oils to enjoy?
Well, lots of people don't I love all things sleep, okay? So one of the things with sleep is that we have an alertness cycle, and most people recognise that we're pretty alert at 9 o'clock in the morning, and we have a second alertness part at 9 o'clock at night, but we have a dip in the middle of the day, right? So everyone has that post-lunchtime, oh, I feel a bit tired, and that's actually physiological. And a lot of cultures take advantage of this and use it as a siesta time, okay?
Yes.
But for me, one of the things I do feel the lull after lunch like everybody else, and I find the energy, when I had the diffuser on for the energy oil, is really, really good. So it does pops me up a little bit so I can keep working at that time when we all get a little bit slow
Yes.
and not as efficient. So that's the other thing I use during the day. And it's quite important to have times during the day when you are high energy so that your body gets to be a bit worn out so that you can sleep well that night. So I do enjoy the energy in the afternoon.
Oh, that's great to hear. And I must say, probably a much better decision than some of the other 3 p.m. decisions.
That's right. So forget about the coffee
Yes.
and the chocolate.
Yes.
I'd go for the energy oil.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'd love to talk about not just our sleep routines, but perhaps the sleep routines of the little ones. What are some of the things we can do to ensure that we're starting those good habits early?
Well, as I say, primary is the routine. Also, understanding how much sleep that they need. So the need for sleep decreases with age until we get to adulthood. But little bubs, newborn infants can require up to 16 hours. That's not so much of an issue except for the poor exhausted parents sometimes. But what happens is around toddler time, people start to worry about the amount of sleep and they often don't get the sleep that they need because there's no discipline attached to when they go to sleep. So you've got to remember that toddlers need between 12 and 14 hours, which is a really large amount of sleep. And if we start to create good routines, then it will work really well for you as a parent and for the child, for their development and their good, healthy habits.
Oh, fantastic. And look, I know it's probably going to be a very sensible response from you, but with drinks into the evening or perhaps eating sort of high fat or high sugar foods, when do I need to cut that off sort of during the day?
Well, alcohol is a sleep stealer, okay?
Oh,
so even though if you have enough of it, it will send you to sleep.
Yeah.
About 5 hours later, you will be awake and you've been deprived of good sleep for that period of time and you'll find it difficult to get back to sleep. So people have to recognise that alcohol is a sleep stealer. But sometimes it's very difficult for people to accept this, so that's why we do a sleep diary.
Yes.
And then we say, well, let's try a few nights without alcohol and see how you go. The other thing is that eating a large meal within 3 hours of bedtime, high fat, high sugar, will actually affect your ability to sleep that night. And in fact, research is very clear. Whole foods, really important for our sleep, and those people who have a high fat, high sugar diet have the worst sleep. So no time like the present to start doing the right thing nutritionally and cutting out that alcohol as well.
Perfect. Sounds good. I've heard it here. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Carmel. Today's been certainly eye-opening for myself and I'm sure for all of us, but it's great to know that we certainly can form new habits and we've certainly got some tips now on what we can do along the way to give us that little bit more sleep.
Yeah, well, it's been an absolute pleasure and as you know, I love talking about sleep and so it's been fantastic. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Dr. Carmel.